Hello everyone, today is part 2 of rare items in the JonsBones collection, but before we start, make sure to like and subscribe for more. So here in the JonsBones collection in Brooklyn, we work with retired medical osteology. So these were human bones that were purchased from studies ranging anywhere from 1920 to 1984. Here at the showroom, we reclaim old medical pieces that have been passed on by doctors, dentists, and universities that are no longer being used, and we have them here for display for the public, as well as we collaborate with universities to try to get these pieces back in the hands of those that can benefit from them. Today for this video, we wanted to take a look at some of the interesting pieces in the collection that we have here today. So for the first item today, let's take a look at this demonstrative skull right here. So demonstrative skulls themselves aren't that rare, but this one is unique and rare for a couple interesting reasons. So the first thing I wanted to highlight about this skull is typically demonstrative skulls are done using adult skulls, but this one is actually pediatric, which makes it extremely rare. This specific skull was part of an esteemed medical collection. And after the individual passed away, it actually came on sale on a big auction site. I actually stood there and bidded in the original auction and lost out. But I was so determined to get this skull that I actually tracked down the winner of the auction and convinced him to sell it to me. And from there, we were able to acquire it for the showroom. But this one was just such a personal piece because of the story of how I acquired it. I felt as if this one had significant medical history to show and to share. So I really wanted to have this piece in so I can teach more people about it today. When looking at pieces today, as well as any other video that we wanted to do, we wanted to take a second to highlight the sensitivity of our collection. These were all once people and should be treated with the utmost respect and dignity possible. A lot of times these skulls were used for education and understanding, and now that they've fallen out of circulation in the medical field, we want to do our best to be able to spread public education and to spread more awareness about these pieces. Some of these items, such as pediatric skulls, have a real weight to them. So we wanted to take the time to just acknowledge this, but to also be able to celebrate what these pieces can share and what we can learn from having them in the collection. So we hope you enjoy the video. So actually, when looking at this skull, there were 3 things that stood out to me that I wanted to highlight for you guys watching at home. First of all, when you look at the inside of the eyes, there's almost a porousness to it that you can immediately see when looking at the inside of the ridges here. And that's an interesting sign that isn't common in most skulls. The next thing that I noticed, there are rivets at the bottom of the teeth, and these can be indicative of malnutrition. The last biggest factor when looking at this pediatric skull is the porousness that you can see in the back of the skull in these 2 spots here. Putting all this together, it actually determined that this individual suffered from scurvy, which is a vitamin C deficiency. And when I'm even here talking about it, I find that it's sometimes extremely hard to talk about because if we look at the hardware used on this skull, it's indicative of skulls from the 1970s to 1980s. So up to this point, scurvy had been discovered and we knew treatments for it. So the conditions that this individual must have been under to cause him to have this condition is extremely heart-wrenching. So the life that this individual lived is evident in the records of their bones. And sometimes this can paint a sad picture for human history and what conditions some people lived under at certain points of human history. Skulls like this are important because different pathologies and diseases can't be replicated as well through plastic. So being able to study a real ailment that this person suffered under is extremely important. And not only that, but it stands in as a historical snapshot of different conditions and situations that people lived under during different parts of the world. So I just wanted to highlight this piece in the collection so we can all learn from it and better understand human history. Today, I wanted to take a look at these antique demonstrative skulls. These are almost impossible to find so to have 4 of them is extremely rare. Demonstrative skulls were used to show the inner workings of bone to anatomists, but these were actually used over 100 years ago. So behind me are vintage and antique demonstrative skulls that we actually acquired for the showroom. Now looking at this demonstrative skull, you can actually see the differences between this one and the original one I just showed you. But antique pieces actually use different hardware than modern pieces, and you could just see how the skull was prepared. They're extremely different from one to the other. And when we look at how the nerve endings and wire work was prepared, it's extremely different from its counterparts in the modern version. Now, out of all of the demonstrative skulls that we've had here at the JonsBones collection, which is over 50, we only have 4 antique pieces to really speak on how rare they really are. These pieces also come with rare cuts and preparations that more modern pieces actually don't have. So you can actually pull these pieces back to see the inner workings of the skull here. Super incredible. Let's peel back this sinus cut and we can actually look at the inside sinus cuts of an individual that was probably born over 100 years ago. Over here, the mandible has been removed on both sides, which is actually uncommon for demonstrative skulls. So you can actually see how the teeth interact with the nerve endings. There's also been artificial dye and wax included, so you can see how they would connect to the teeth. This is extremely uncommon for a medical preparation, and I just wanted to highlight the beauty of it today for you guys on YouTube. At the turn of the century, a lot of the original medical skulls were actually made by individual artisans and physicians. There was so much craft that was put into constructing these skulls. As they became more mass-produced, we actually started to see less nuanced and beautiful skulls, and more skulls that had common preparations over the years. So to find the original demonstrative skulls that actually have so much uniqueness, I just wanted to show you guys today because it's truly incredible. Also, what makes these pieces unique is they all have custom cuts and preparations that other demonstrative skulls don't have. One telltale sign that it's actually an antique skull, other than its patina and the preparation styles, are these latches. The jewelry seen in older preparations are actually completely different than their modern counterparts. And this stylized latch was only used for these demonstrative skulls. So when I see them in an antique preparation, I instantly know the provenance and age of these skulls. This one here also has an extremely unique sinus cut where you can see the inner workings of the skull. And what I think are just so beautiful about antique demonstrative skulls is they often stain the trabeculi and the inside of the bone to really highlight the difference between the surface value and the inner workings of the skull. Truly an amazing work of art. Oftentimes, more modern demonstrative skulls would actually use nylon that gets adhered to the teeth and bone. But when we look at older demonstrative skulls, they actually use wax. And that's one of the biggest characteristic changes between more modern counterparts to these original antique skulls. And just look at the beauty and intricacy that was done in the preparation methods. I just think that's so phenomenal. Now for the final piece of the collection that I wanted to show you guys today. This here is a geriatric skull, typically referred to someone of old age. These are typically called geriatric skulls because of their extreme underbite that they have. But this one is the specific one that I wanted to highlight for you guys today. Out of all of the geriatric skulls that I've ever seen, I've never seen a skull with such an extreme underbite. So just look here, how much the mandible goes over the individual. Just look at how exaggerated this mandible has become. This mandible has deteriorated over the last 10 years, and you can really see how it's affected the individual. For context, look at this individual's jaw versus a regular mandible, and just how much has deteriorated from one piece to the other. It's astounding. The human body is unique and reacts differently to different environmental pressures, and you can really just see the effects of it here. But what's actually happening? So for you guys watching at home, I want you to bite down really hard on your teeth right now, like this. When I was taking online courses in forensic anthropology, there was a phrase I was taught called, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you look right here at this skull, the teeth are biting down and constantly exerting pressure. But once you lose all your teeth, that pressure is actually gone. So the human body notices it and starts to divert bone to other parts of the body that can actually benefit from this. This is why individuals that actually have dentures begin to suffer bone loss, because once they lose that pressure in their mandible, it starts to become elongated and they develop an underbite. This is actually a skull that wasn't as severe as the first one I showed you. If you look right here at the mandible, the cavities in which the teeth would reside are not fully healed yet. So this wasn't as late of a stage as the previous one I showed you where it's fully healed. But as you can see how the mandible interacts with the skull, you can see the elongation that happens because of the deterioration of the mandible. So if we look at Popeye the Sailor Man, he probably lost all of his teeth and developed an underbite the same as the skull we have here in the showroom. So it's incredible how they were able to transition this from real life to a cartoon. This is why studying real bone is so important. Different skulls have different conditions, pathologies, and deteriorations that they suffer from, and this is why med students need real bone. And guys, this is why caring for your dental hygiene is extremely important for your holistic healthcare. Look at the effects of what happens if you can lose all of your teeth. It's not the best. And there you have it, guys. There are some other rarest items that we have at the JonsBones showroom. We've made it our goal over the last 5 years to help with public accessibility. If you don't have access to medical collections or museums, you can always come here to learn more about osteologies, and we could take a look at rare pieces that reside in the world.